All right, I'm going to open the meeting at 6:01. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and I will pass it over to Chairman Vargo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Clerk, when you are situated, would you please call the roll of the City Council?
Councilwoman Melly Garthwaite.
Melly Garthwaite at large present.
Councilman Peter Rivera.
Peter Rivera at large present.
Councilman Sean Ronan.
Here.
Councilwoman Ann Heffernan is absent. Councilwoman Nancy Tagliatella.
Councilwoman Nancy Tagliatella, 2nd District, present.
Councilwoman Sarah Akbarali is absent. Councilman Gary Donovan is absent. Councilman Edward McMillan.
Councilman Edward McMillan, 5th District, present.
Councilwoman Dawn Callahan is absent. Councilwoman Catherine Tucker.
Councilwoman Catherine Tucker, 7th District, present.
Councilman David Beaton.
Councilman David Beaton, 9th District, present.
Councilman Ronald Quagliani.
Ron Quagliani, 10th District, present.
And Chairman Christopher Vargo.
Chairman Christopher Vargo, 8th District, present.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman, for the City Council.
Thank you. And would you please call the roll for the Charter Revision Commission?
Roberta Garlock.
Commissioner Garlock here.
Arthur Gilbert is absent. Oh, he's absent. Is Bridget Hosky? Stephen Idarola?
Present.
Tony Mancini? Gail Tagliatella?
Here.
Leilani Perry?
Present.
And Chairman Arthur Kelly.
Here.
And we have a quorum for the Charter Revision Commission as well.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And last but not least, would you please read the call of the meeting into the record?
City of West Haven, City Council and Charter Revision Commission Notice of Special Meeting, June 24th, 2026, 6 p.m., City Council Chambers, 3rd floor, City Hall. Notice is hereby given that in accordance with Rule 4.5 of the Rules of Procedure of the City Council and the procedure adopted by the Charter Revision Commission, Christopher Vargo Jr., Chairman of the City Council, and Arthur Kelly, Chairman of the Charter Revision Commission, have called a joint special meeting of the West Haven City Council and the Charter Revision Commission to be held at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, June 24th, 2026, in the City Council Chambers, 3rd floor, 355 Main Street, West Haven, Connecticut. The purpose of this special meeting is as follows. Deliberations on the City Council's recommendations to the Charter Revision Commission for revisions to the draft revised charter.
Thank you, Stacy. All right, we're nearing the end. What we're going to do is start this evening with the items that we did not even get to last night, and then we will end with all of the discussion on the VIA. So what I'd like to do, and I think it makes sense, and I believe that Chairman Kelly agrees, is that we're going to have a discussion on items 6, 7, and 8 together.
Agree.
Which are all in Chapter 2. Page 12. Attorney Mednick, when you are all set, the three of these are kind of intertwined. Would you mind giving us an overview of what these three items are meant to accomplish?
Good evening. Nice to see everybody tonight, or this evening. These sections have to do with the issue of vacancy in the office of mayor, and they're all connected. 6A2, well, let's go to 6A1, which we're not changing, just tell the full story so we can have a linear story here. In the event there's a vacancy in the office of mayor, the chair of the council succeeds until a successor is elected and certified following the next quadrennial municipal election. for the remainder of the term for which the mayor was elected and shall receive the same compensation. I think we need to actually, now that I'm reading it, I'm glad I just did, or special election. And you'll see why I want to make a possible Scrivener's correction there, because it go to the next provision, which is 2. So what happens is the president, the chair, becomes the mayor. And we'll have a situation a little later where if the chair fails to want to be the mayor. So whenever a vacancy does occur, capital V vacancy, in the office of mayor, the successor shall remain in office until a new mayor is elected and qualified following the next general election, where the mayoral candidates can qualify and be placed on the ballot as a special election for the remainder of the term. Notwithstanding the foregoing, by a vote of 9 members, the council by a vote of 9 members may declare a standalone special election. Right? So that's what we're talking about. The normal circumstance would be that this would take place at the next quadrennial municipal election. Actually, we probably don't want to say quadrennial. We probably want to say the next municipal election or special election, because we're not going to wait 3 years. So that if the vacancy occurs, if we have a 4-year term, let's assume a 4-year term for a moment, and the vacancy occurs in year 1 or the beginning of year 2, the presumption is that the election would take place that November, which is the municipal election year, even if not here, even if you don't have because you have the 4-year terms and you don't have a municipal election in town, the odd-numbered years are municipal election years. So you would have a special election on the municipal election day for the mayor, and that mayor would serve for the remainder of the 2 years left on the 4-year term. But we do have the option that if it occurs in year 1, for example, or year 3, that the election has to take place in the general election of that year, unless the council by a vote of 9 decides just to have a special election. And then it just takes place whenever it takes place. So the rule is generally you will elect a new mayor at the next election. It could be this year in the gubernatorial year, it could be next year in the municipal year, it could be 2 years from now in the presidential year. It could be whatever election is taking place, there would be a, quote, special election on general election day to replace the mayor who leaves office. I think that's the essence of it. I hope I kept it simple. 3 is simply a temporary vacancy. If the mayor is away, there's a temporary vacancy. The chair operates on a temporary basis to serve as mayor. And 6A4 is just, I think it was just a minor change here. This basically says there's a little change in here basically that says that in the event the chair of the council is unable or unwilling to assume the office of mayor and fails to do so, assume the position within 24 hours of the time the mayor becomes unavailable, then the chair pro tem, so I think we're going to have a chair pro tem under the new charter, is willing or able, then serves and actually acts as the mayor. In the event neither the chair nor the chair pro tem is willing to be able to assume the office of the mayor, the council by a majority vote of the entire membership. So there we have a very clear direction. It's a majority vote of the entire membership shall elect a member of the council to assume the office of mayor in accordance with the provisions of the charter. So that's when this very temperate and well-balanced city council will have a real tenacious war when the chair and the chair pro tem decide not to run and the rest of you want to be mayor. But that's a different issue. So that's how those 3 sections work. The section that's deleted, you'll see 4 is deleted. That really is the next change. Actually, the change on the failure of the chair to assume the mayor is not the change. The change is really the term of mayoral vacancy is now in the definition of vacancy. And that's why it's deleted. We're not getting rid of a definition of mayoral vacancy. It is in the defined term. So those are the changes.
Thank you. So just a little bit of clarity. What the charter presently says is it doesn't go into this much detail. If there's a vacancy in the office of mayor, whether it's temporary or permanent, then the chair of the council assumes the office. If not, then it goes to an election by the council. So basically, 1 and 4 are sort of staying the way that they are. What we've really tried to do is we said, especially on another 4-year term or a new 4-year term, what we don't want is an unelected person to serve as mayor for 3 years, 3.5 years, or even 1 year. So we created this scheme here that allows the voters to have a direct say much earlier in the process. And then I think that the one important part is the council voting to have that special election, especially in a temporary. If you could enlarge upon that point, the temporary vacancy, because we talked about that at great length.
During the period the council was debating this, that we had very detailed timelines that were in the charter, and there are eye-crossing kind of timelines that we put together. And so what we did, and the reason we have this fail-safe to allow for the special election, is in the event the vacancy comes too late to get it on the ballot for the November election. So the mayor leaves the beginning of October, there's no way to petition and get it on the general election ballot in time for the general election. We left the room for the special election so that you could hold the special election later in November or in December. At some point, the idea is to hold it as soon as you can, because the idea was, particularly with a 4-year term, you don't want to have an unelected mayor serving for multiple years. And so the special election, in any circumstance, it's a special election. So if you're holding a mayoral election in even the municipal, the free municipal year or the state year or the federal year, it's going to be a special election, but it's going to be on the ballot. So no one will see it as a special election, but legally it'll be a special election. And so the objective is you need to have enough time to be able to petition to get it on. If you don't, you can go the route of a special election freestanding.
Just my curiosity. Since in any circumstance this would be a special election, do we have to refer to municipal election in A1?
No, well, I just said it has to be the next election or special election, because the reference to both quadrennial or municipal is unnecessary. It would be the next general election or special election. It's going to be a special election, but the idea is to time it with the general election. So I will clean that language up so that it's very clear that that is the case. But it is a special election that's tied to a municipal
And
general
again,
election.
that election can be any election. Doesn't have to be a local election, municipal election.
Any further discussion from the city council? Mr. Chairman?
Any discussion, questions from CRC? Yes, Member Hosky.
So I'm curious, at what point would that special election time out? So I hear you. You just tell me, speak up. It's okay. At what point does it time out? Like, at what point would we just let it roll into, say, that 4th year? So say the mayor resigns October 31st of the 3rd year, and it's too late to get them in that November election, and then you're coming around and that term would have ended anyways, and you're like, oh, we could do a special election for January, but we said those special elections, and the reason we want to go to 4 years is they're too expensive, so why would we have a special election in February and spend the $60,000 and then have to have that candidate run again in
Because it's keyed to the next election, regardless of what the election is, you don't have to do anything except declare a special election to coincide with that election. But if it's the next municipal election where the mayor is running, the likelihood is if somebody succeeds the office of mayor in October of 2026, let's just use this year, you're probably going to let that person remain in office until November of 2027, when a mayor will be on the line, when the mayoral election will be on the line. You have the option of having a special election standalone.
The city
Council would make
has
that. Council would make that decision.
So this gives them room to decide whether or not in that year or 13 months to say, well, let's hold off because the election is coming that November and we didn't have time to do it here.
Yeah, if you have a willing chair who is willing to serve as mayor for 13 months or 14 months, then they just serve for the next 13 or 14 months. Or if that willing chair actually wants to run for mayor, it puts them in a very advantageous position for the following year. But the option would be up to the council in that circumstance. We were moving toward a very prescriptive scenario, but I think it was better to go more generalized, and it does give the discretion to the council to make that decision.
Any other discussion or questions from CRC? Hearing none. You have no issue?
Yes, Councilman Quagliani.
Before we go forward, could I go back just for 1 second? Section 5, election of city council. It's the same page, just farther up, 5A. It says district council members at the general municipal election in November 1961 and biennially thereafter. So should we change that, Counselor, to quadrennially, because that's...
We need to do, depending on what the start date is, if the start date is 2027, we should put 2027 in there. That's a good catch.
Thank you. Okay, so that takes care of items 6, 7, and 8. Next would be item 4. I don't believe, Mr. Chairman, that we finished the discussion on that, and that was the alignment of the elections in possibly 2031 and how that proposal would work, assuming that all other elected offices are on a 4-year term. Anybody have any discussion on that item?
Can we go over it one more time for everyone?
So the way it's proposed right now, let's talk about the whole election. 2027, we'll make the correction that Councilman Quagliani just recommended. You will have 4-year terms under the current draft of the document for the mayor, town and city clerk, board of assessment appeals, and the council, the city council. So you will then serve for 4 years and then run for re-election in 2031. In 2029, and the Board of Ed will be on that as well. 5 members of the Board of Ed will be on the ballot as well for the 4-year term. In 2029, now we're moving into the Board of Ed section. 4 members of the Board of Ed will run for re-election. Their 4-year term will have come to a close. They will then run for a 2-year term. And they will run for a 2-year term that will end with the 2031 election cycle. And in 2031, everybody who runs for municipal office will be on a slate together in 2031. That's how it works.
Yeah. Any questions from City Council? Any questions from CRC? Yes.
Chairman, I have a question regarding voting on the city council, not the Board of Ed, when you are a city councilor. So my question would be the ethics part of it. Can I direct my question to? Okay. Attorneys, I was talking to Commissioner Hosky, and because I had watched last night's meeting, and I heard her say that the city council should recuse themselves because they are in a position of profit, which technically they are, because we do get a very small stipend, tiny little stipend. Should we recuse ourselves from voting on changing the term from 2 to 4?
And I'll defer to the Corporation Counsel. He is the counsel for the municipality. But in my experience around the state of Connecticut, one, you have a statutory obligation to vote on the charter. And you cannot recuse an entire body on a matter of general concern or general interest. It's like you should recuse yourself on voting for a tax increase or a tax reduction because you're going to be affected on your budget decisions in a generalized way. And that is not considered to be a conflict of interest by any ethics body, statewide, local, etc. There's a political question. And the way that sometimes gets resolved is you sometimes put the effect of these things off so that it might not have impact on you individually. And, if you, for example, are concerned about the political implications, oh my God, they're going to vote me out because I just voted myself a 4-year term if I get reelected in 2027. The way you get around that, even though it's not a legal conflict in any way, shape, or form, is you move it to 2031. So the likelihood 5 years from now that the people around this table, there'll probably be some of you who will be here in 2031, but I would wager that a good majority will not. So you're not really necessarily acting in your personal interest in that regard. So that's more of a political judgment than a legal judgment. There's no conflict in my view.
No ethical conflict at all. No ethical conflict at all.
I don't believe so. I'm a real stickler for those things. I do not see an ethical conflict or quagmire or anything in this regard.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
May I comment on that?
Chairman.
Yes.
My personal view on that is that we talk a lot about putting the questions in front of the voters. So with this being on the ballot in 2026, the voters in 2026 will then be able to decide whether or not the mayor should have a 4-year term, the city council should have a 4-year term, so on and so forth. It doesn't take effect until 2027. So assuming that the voters by majority say, we believe that these offices should have a 4-year term, whoever then decides to run in 2027, the voters will decide should that individual be given a 4-year term. So that's the way I reconcile that.
I just want to add that going back to when the CRC first convened, that was something that Commissioner Hosky brought up early on, whether or not making that recommendation back to the council would put the council in a position to have to vote in their self-interest. I don't find an ethical violation read strictly, but I will say that as far as the voters are concerned, the appearance of impropriety may itself be improper, and you may want to avoid that. You can do that by, as Attorney Mednick said, pushing off the 4-year terms beginning until such a date as, I guess we don't know how many, if any of you will roll off, so to speak. But so it won't seem as if you're purposely lining yourselves up for now an incumbent 4-year term right there. That's an option that you have available to you. When we talked about staggering elections, we had talked about shaping it in such a way so some of the Board of Ed members would run for a truncated term and then everyone would be caught up. But you could just extend that out farther instead of trying to do it at the next possible mathematical opportunity.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Yes.
So I just want to clear up this, me being quoted. I never said it is the appearance of impropriety that I am referring to. I'm not calling anyone unethical. It is the appearance. And I'll go back to a solid example of that. When I was on the city council, there was, the mayor was going to get a raise. And everyone was in an uproar about it because how can the mayor give themselves a raise? And the feedback was, well, we're not giving the mayor a raise because the raise is going to go into effect after the next election. And the feedback was also, well, that mayor knows that they're running in the next election, so essentially they're giving that mayor a raise. It is the vision of what you said, of what people think. And I can appreciate that you yourself have resolved it, that you don't believe you're doing that. And I trust that you don't believe you're doing anything wrong. But again, it's the perception of the outside and what your residents think, what your voters think. It's not about you. You're only one vote when you walk into to vote that day. You have to worry about the electors and what they think and what their mindset is. And I'm just trying to help ensure that we understand it from all sides. So my accusation isn't that I think anyone is, I'm telling you what I've heard. I've heard that people have said, well, the mayor needs her people in their seats. No, the residents need their people in their seats. It's not about the mayor having her team. It's about the residents having their team. And respectfully, I've not heard that. And last night I watched the meeting again, and the feedback was about what the mayor needed, what the mayor needed. It wasn't about what the residents needed. And that's my feedback.
Member Perry?
Again, I'm just fascinated positively about how we have this discussion and how it kind of, shapes itself. But the one thing when I think about this, I think, number one, the residents will have the ability to just determine whether or not they think a 4-year term or a 2-year term makes sense, right? So they've made that decision. They also get to decide, any one of you who are in this room, whether or not, when you run again, whether or not you get voted in. So there's no impropriety because they get to make that decision, right? It's not like because you're sitting here, the assumption is you're going to get your office again. So either way, you have to run, and the voters yet again get to make that decision.
Any other discussion? Hearing none? Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that I wasn't able to connect with everybody throughout the day, but I did speak with a few current Board of Ed members about the way that the staggering issue might be resolved. And I could just tell you that there is no consensus. The only consensus is that everybody believes that all the options are not wonderful, but they don't have generally an opinion of what would be the least bad option. But so I just wanted to put that out there. I know it's not really helpful information, but I thought that it was important to connect with as many Board of Ed members as I could. They recognize the problem. They recognize that the solutions aren't great, but I didn't hear any overwhelming majority of which option would be best or least worse.
I just want to remind you, you have the option to just not do it also, right? If it's too convoluted or complicated, or if there's a political cost that you all don't want to pay. Steve and I are not factoring in political costs when we're letting you know how these things would work if you decide that you want to recommend them, or if they go to the ballot, or if they get voted on. You all will need to do that for yourselves and within your bodies. But you all, if you don't come to an agreement here, then that's fine. July 1 is the date by which the CRC will determine what they send back for thumbs up or thumbs down binary approval. And then it will be whatever it will be. But we had discussed when we were figuring out how to make best use of everybody's time together, that we would identify those things that had commonality and could be worked through, and also identify those things that we needed to move off of. So you all let me know if you think you're making good progress, but you don't have to resolve this tonight. We do have the July 1 meeting that the CRC can convene and talk about it some more. And it's also okay if you don't agree on something, or if it doesn't happen as a recommendation or a referendum. We ought not have 46 referendum questions, I'll tell you that, right?
Thank you. So even though we have no issue with it right now, like Kevin said, we'll meet next week and the CRC will decide if they want to choose this option or not change anything. Thank you.
All set to move on to the next topic, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay. Council, I want to just make sure that you all agree, but I think we have tackled everything on this list except all of the items that have to do with the West Haven Public Library / Village Improvement Association.
I don't agree. I think you may still have recommendation number 35.
Yeah, I see. Well, I was lumping all library / VIA items together, so I have on my list still items to discuss 35.
That's sort of a Board of Ed issue,
is
but really it's about Board of Ed reporting to the finance director in time for the
I
finance
misread it. I
director's monthly
apologize.
report.
Nope, you are right. So we'll now tackle 35 and then the rest.
And then I also have 32
I have 32 as
outstanding specificity or uniformity around the department head's standard for terms of office.
You said we're going to pend it.
They'll put that over to the CRC. Okay, so 35 then. If you have the red line, I think it's footnote 227. If you do not, I think it's 210. But either and appears at page 47. Recommendation 35.
I also have page 29. Page 29. Number 29. 29. Number 29.
Okay, we'll make sure that we cover 29 as well.
Okay, so just for clarity, we're going to be on 35 right now.
35 now, Chapter 7, Section 3. Let me see which one you have. So yours will be footnote 210.
Page 41.
Chapter 7.
Depends on which version you have, I suppose. So look at footnote 210. That should be in Chapter 7, Section 3.
This is under the prohibited payments and expenditures section, correct? That is correct. Yeah, okay. So, yep,
47.
page 47.
We're not talking about village improvement. No, we're talking about a requirement that the Board of Education report to the finance director in time for the finance director to compile that information into the director's report that happens in this chamber for the council on a monthly basis.
No, that's not.
Applicability of the provision to Board of Education expenditures.
No, there's
42.
yeah. So
Was that comment is on 47?
the issue is that number 35, Attorney Badnick, has to do with the liability.
That's
And-
exactly right.
Right. I think where everybody thought we were discussing is the provision where the Board of Ed will be obligated to present its budget actuals to the finance director to be inclusive.
That's
in
a
all
different
of the-
provision.
That's a different
Yeah,
provision. Yes.
which we, I think, discussed already. No, I think we're in the right one. Liability is 35, where we're supposed to be. So
So
this is, I'm sorry.
I have us on page 47.
And if you have the red line, it's 49, whatever it is. It's
The SGM 67 with the council recommendation 35.
absolutely.
Under liability.
That's it.
C
That's it.
47.
That's it, Mr. Chair. So this is a liability. It's a pretty standard liability provision. It's new. It's new to your charter. The Charter Commission recommended it. And we made a minor change in here to make sure that everybody understood that the Board of Ed is part of this, that there is liability for people who fail to abide by the line items established by the Board of Ed. And what that means is while the council cannot change their line items, when they establish their line items, they need to be fixed in place until and unless they decide to make a change. And so this needs to, when an expenditure is being made out of the Board of Ed, it has to run through the finance department, however it's done. they have the same obligations to tie it to a line in the budget. If they don't, and that expenditure goes out that is not tied to a line in the budget, they have potential personal liability. So what's good for the general government is good for the Board of Education, and that's all this is. That's all this provision does.
Member Hosky?
I want to, sorry, Stace. I want to ask a question. Do they have the same requirement, or maybe it's still not a requirement, but I thought you couldn't change line items and budget lines until the fourth quarter. Does the Board of Ed not have that stipulation?
The Board of Ed has total discretion over the modification of their budget during the course of a fiscal year.
So basically you're saying if they overdraw an account, like if that check bounces, they can't just take monies from the lunchroom and put it over for the gym account to balance the gym account.
Well, they can do that at some point, but the point is if they make the expenditure, if the expenditure is made and there's no money in that line, at that time, they could rectify the problem later on, but the person who made that decision is potentially liable for that money.
Okay. And the reason we're putting the Board of Ed out so specifically, we're not mentioning Allentown Fire Department, the police department, is because they're not falling in line with that way of thinking.
No. All the others are departments. They're covered by the general provision. The Board of Ed should be covered by the provision. We just want to make sure it's specifically understood that they're covered by the provision. Look, there's a debate. I've had people say to me, gee, why do you call the Board of Education a department of the city? Well, because it is a department of the city. They have a culture where they make arguments that they're not, that they're distinct. If you live in a regional school district, yeah, you are distinct from your towns in your regional school district. You also have the obligation to raise taxes for your school district, like the council raises taxes for the city. But in a municipality where you have a single district Board of Ed, they're a department. And this just is a kind of this kind of a belt and suspenders way of making it clear that they are a department and that their employees have the same liabilities as the employees of the city of West Haven, the other employees.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion from City Council or CRC? Hearing none, we have no issue.
I have no issue, but I do have another question. So they've been doing what they've wanted to do this whole time, and now it's going to be outlined in the charter. What's going to make them fall in line? Because we're going to make somebody liable. How is that enforceable? Through the ethics board? How somebody can lose their job? And I'm fine if any of that happens. I'm just curious that it's in the charter. What makes it enforceable, even though we've known they should be doing it this whole time by our thought? I'm just curious.
So I think the question is whether or not it appears in the charter. Aren't they obligated to operate that way? And what would change? How would their behavior change because we put it in the charter? We've built into this charter, it existed in the charter, and you have a Board of Ethics, that a violation of the charter itself can be brought up by the ethical board. So technically it could be a violation of the ethics. Should someone lose their job in relation? I don't know that that's something that the charter will cover. The Board of Education, the school district will determine that. But there is potentially individual personal liability that flows from this, stemming from such an event that's covered here. So I suppose it gives somebody more very specific language to point to if they wanted to advance some type of enforcement action. I don't know that it will be widely adopted instantaneously. I think there's probably an educational component around changing behavior, but that it kind of starts by making sure that there's something very specific that you can point to when you need to remind people that their behavior needs to change.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, we'll throw it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Attorney Cassini, are we now
And no.
Huh? No?
No.
No?
There was a question from Councilmember Talitella regarding number 29.
29.
She was unsure if that was dealt with. My notes suggest it is, but I'll put that back on you.
I have it that we discussed it yesterday.
Yes.
And
No
then
worries.
I have a circle around 45, which was obviously in my mind because that's the component that I had been discussing about mandating a reporting from the Board of Ed goes to the Finance Department in time for that report.
Yes, why don't we go into that one, and then I think everything else gets lumped together with the VIA discussion.
I think you're left to the VIA at that point, yes.
So we'll go to item 45, that's chapter 7, section 9C4, small I. Now, I believe that this provision, Attorney Cassini, is that the charter requires the finance director of the city to present monthly reports to the city council. What we are asking is now that the Board of Ed expenditures be included in that report, and that it just mandates that that information gets to the city's finance director in time to be able to be included in that report to be able to be submitted to the city council.
Yes, this is not just a requirement for reporting, but there's a timing component such that it can appear in the finance director's report. I don't think there's a requirement that the Board of Ed send any member over, just the information, so that in the monthly reporting, that those numbers are captured and included.
Which is how the other departments operate through the finance department, I believe that's how it's working now.
Yes.
Thank you. Any discussion from the city council?
58.
It's 4. Yeah, 4I. Can you go on the record, please?
Section 9C4I. Underneath reporting requirements. Page 50, C58.
Well, that's the same problem we had yesterday, right? If you're reading from one, the outline numbers have changed, so it may be section 10 for you. The language of that body reads, the board shall report to the mayor and to the council the following: a monthly comparison of actual and estimated expenditures, which such comparison shall be submitted in sufficient time to be included in the Department of Finance's monthly report pursuant to Chapter 7, Section 3A, Numerat 3.
Attorney Cassini, I think it's that language that the city council is recommending be added. It was in the recommendation back to us that a monthly comparison of actual and estimated expenditures, but we added the language for the timing. That way it gets incorporated into the general monthly report that we receive.
That's right. It's not a request that or a requirement that an individual come over or stay late, but rather that the information be submitted in time.
Anything from the city council? Councilman Tucker?
I just want to clarify that my understanding of what this is saying is accurate, because I know that when we make line item changes for the city council, or a line item change is being made here in the city, it has to come to the city council, and we have to approve it before it happens, correct? Is that the same conversation?
No.
You don't have the ability to do that for Board of Ed.
I know, but the city council does have to do that, correct? I'm just making a comparison.
Yes, but that's not what...
I know.
Yeah. Yes.
But however, for BOE, they have the ability to make changes without coming to the city council. So when the line items, they can move things around in their budgets, in their line items, and don't have to get approval prior to doing so. But if you wait until the end of the year, then everything is all jumbled around and crazy.
You got it.
And nobody knows or nobody can figure it out. And then there's deficits and there's need for replacement of funds and all the things, right? So what we're asking is that these things come monthly for reconciliation to the city council after they've already made the changes because they have a statutory ability to do that we don't have. So I think that, just for clarification, I just want to make sure that that's what we're talking about here and that we all understand why we're asking for this.
You are 100% right.
Okay, thank you.
That is not in the abstract. I'm sure you all know that that very same thing happened at the top of the year based on what the finances that came last year. All of a sudden, there was a deficit. The idea is not to exercise any control, statutorily not feasible or possible, but rather to see things that are coming in real time or as close to real time as you can, rather than learn about them much further down the road.
Right. The second meeting of the city council every month, we get a report from the finance director that has a synopsis of where we are financially, and then almost like a general ledger of this is where we should be in the budget year, and this is where we actually are, so we can see how the trend is. All we're asking is that we receive the same information from the Board of Ed. That way, if we see that they're trending high, then we may be able to have a conversation to say, okay, what needs to be done to make sure that there's no deficit at the end of the year? Or if they're trending low, what opportunities are there that, you might be able to make use of those extra funds? So it just keeps the conversation open and has just another pair of eyes on to make sure that we don't get into a situation at the end of the year where we have a multi-million-dollar hole in the budget. Councilman Tucker?
I just want to be clear, we don't have oversight over what they do with their funds. Recommendations are fine if you want to make them. They do not have to listen, and we understand that. So I just want to be clear that I don't want to give the impression that what we're doing here is aimed at trying to control what Board of Ed does. It's for transparency purposes, and I just want to be clear about that because I know there's sensitivity about the perception that we're trying to step on their toes or vice versa. So I just want to say that because that's not what I think we intend to say.
Absolutely.
To the contrary, and I agree with the councilwoman who's been quite perspicacious in picking up on what that section. Another word, the walking thesaurus. But the point I wanted to make is one of the reasons we've put these provisions in, and you guys at the council really tighten it up, is boards of ed come to you. I'm sure you've experienced this with their budget, and they say, well, if you give us $1 million more or $5 million more, we will spend it on the curriculum, science programs, whatever it may be. This is a way of holding them accountable for that. What we have found over the years is you get to the next year's budget. I chaired the finance committee for 8 of my 10 years on the Board of Alders in New Haven. We found that they didn't spend the money the way they told us they were going to spend the money. And it's better to find that out earlier so that you can call them on it during the budget season. So that's another, it's not a gotcha provision, but it's an accountability provision.
No, I agree with you. That isn't exactly what I said. I said it differently, but your point is taken, and thank you for that clarification.
Are you all set? All set? Yes. Okay. Councilman McMillan, did you have anything? You're all set? Any other comments from the council? Mr. Chairman?
Any discussion from CRC?
Yes.
Member Hosky.
So when you say it's the Board of Ed, who on the Board of Ed is responsible for this? I mean, it's so broad. Is it the elector, the Board of Ed, the electors that we have elected to be there, the people, or is it the superintendent of schools and his, what's that guy's name? Neil's not there anymore. No, Matt Cavallero was the, right, but what's his position? Right, so is it the finance director from the board? Like, who's responsible for getting that information? Because it's so broad, everybody could say, well, it wasn't me. I don't know.
Well, they have someone who's receiving the information and the money from our finance director already. They have a whole
Department.
setup over there, yeah.
So is it the finance director of the Board of Ed? That's
Well, they can elect it to be anybody they'd want. It
I
can
would
be
think they would decide, they have
Sure.
to decide who's going to submit that information on a monthly basis, which would probably be the finance director through the superintendent.
okay, so that's what we're expecting them to figure
Yes.
out how it's going to get over to the finance director.
Yeah, that'll be their responsibility to set that up in a way that makes sense.
That's how we're getting it today, through the director of finance.
I would suspect it would not change, but if they wanted it to be
Right.
the fishing coach, then it could be that.
Yeah.
If they have a fishing coach.
I'm just curious, is why I'm asking, because that would be the person that's not following, that could be brought up against the code of ethics for not, so I'm
Well,
asking a question
yeah.
to see if there's an expectation. That's all.
We left it general so that it can remain general. But if you ever have a circumstance where the Board of Ed says, well, you didn't tell us specifically who, is it all the members of the Board of Ed, whatever it may be, you could pass an ordinance to clarify it. You could always clarify it by ordinance. If they play that game, I think the generic reference to the Board of Ed should be sufficient to get the information. If it becomes a problem, you can say the chair of the Board of Ed shall cause the superintendent or such other official to provide the information. But it doesn't make sense to be that specific in the charter. That's the reason it was left in a broad way.
Well,
I think
aren't
if
we
we-
being specific because they said that they're getting it now, but now we're writing it in here to be specific about getting it. So
About getting it on a monthly basis.
Yeah, this is a
we're
monthly-
getting it. Well,
And that's more
am I
recent.
supposed
This
to
is a
know
new
that?
reporting
I'm
requirement.
just asking questions. So we're just more recently getting it on a
Yeah,
monthly
with
basis.
the newest,
Thank you,
with the
Councilman.
newest director of finance, she's really got her arms around what things are happening from a financial perspective at the board, and she's only been there for 8 months, 9 months, so it's getting better and better with the reporting part of it, with her getting her arms around the whole strategy and vision for the financials for the Board of Ed. So it is coming around. It wasn't always like that.
Thank you.
So ultimately, Kevin, the superintendent is responsible because he's the department head.
Yeah, although I don't know that superintendent will be the one who compiles. I don't
No,
think
they
that should
wouldn't,
be.
but ultimately he's responsible as a department head to see that
and
information.
authorized to delegate it properly.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilwoman Tagliatella.
I can say that Anne is doing a fabulous job. She has been there less than a year, and she's had to clean up quite a bit. She does report to Neil Cavallaro, her reports, and I think she's doing a great job. She's doing it in a timely manner, and she's following all the guidelines and trying to reverse the mistakes that have been made in the past. You can't keep following something that's wrong. She's trying to turn things around and have things done the proper way. So she is stepping up to the plate, and she's had a lot on her plate since she's been here. So
Thank you. Any other discussion? So we have no issue. Pass it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So at this moment, I think that we are going to have a discussion on items 39 and 46. All dealing with the Public Library and Village Improvement Association. Attorney Cassini, I know that you and Attorney Mednick had a meeting earlier this week with attorneys for the Village Improvement Association.
We did.
And what we, just for by way of background to the commission, is that we batted around several very specific provisions that we were going to recommend. And then on the last day, last Thursday, Attorney Cassini advised us that the attorneys were going to get together this past Monday. And what we decided to do is leave a very broad recommendation open that allows all of us to have an open discussion to try to figure out what, if any, modifications to the charter are appropriate and would make sense for various reasons. Not the least of which is, again, reporting for, especially the financial reporting, to make sure that if tax dollars are being used to fund the operations of the library, that the taxpayers through City Hall and the City Council are aware of how those tax dollars are being spent. So at this time, I'd like Attorney Cassini to give us an overview of the substance of those discussions and where we
Sure,
are.
Steve and I can both do it together. We met with their counsel and with their executive director, Colleen Bailey. We discussed why it had been brought up at the CRC and discussed in City Council. We heard from them their concerns. Their concerns were no different than what the public hearing illuminated for us and I'll repeat those. I said them earlier, so I'll be brief. You heard public comment from two individuals around the floor for budgeting and pinning that to a growth that would rise to, I think he said, 1.5% to up to 3% of the annualized budget. And then you heard another individual speak to whether or not either of these bodies or this charter is actually legally effective to control any expenditure that comes from the city council in budget. The operation is this: the number is set, whatever it is, and it's divided by 12, and each month a literal check is or transfer is made and deposited from city coffers into the public library's bank account, which is different than all the other departments. They were concerned that in the past administration, their budget had been more than just slashed, gutted, and they wanted to ensure that that couldn't happen going forward. They wanted to reiterate the historical nature of the relationship between the VIA as stewards of the library. They own the building that the library is housed in, and they take control of all the programming that comes out of there, not just the books, as the director has told all of us many times. There's cooling centers and warming centers. They act as an information center. They act as a community resource. I think we're all familiar with that, and I don't think anybody has a problem with that. And so what they wanted to do was assure themselves that this was not a power grab, or that this was not an attempt to slash the budget because it hadn't been used in a certain way. The discussion that happened in the CRC asked the city council to look at very specific, finite, prescriptive elements put in the charter. After much discussion, as Chairman Vargo pointed out, it was resolved that there would not be a recommendation going back to the CRC that had those prescriptive, specific elements, mostly because Attorney Bendick and I wanted more time to discuss and gather information. You heard me last night, so I'll say for the record, for those that were not watching last night but are now, we did get some of that during the meeting yesterday. It turns out that stuff was not really all that helpful. It's very, very old documents that date back to the Carnegie grants of 1906, and the creation of the library as a VIA creature from the village of West Haven as a subdivision of the town of Orange, which it was at the time. It also has a provision, interestingly enough, that the town guarantees a certain amount of funding every year. That amount is $500. So obviously that's not sufficient to pin to that. And I've suggested to their attorney that maybe we don't want to take this document quite as literally as she wanted us to. That said, I want to read into the record the transmittal note, because technically there is not a recommendation with specific language from the council to the commission, but rather it's a recommendation in request form that the CRC review language in order to achieve a balance in the relationship of the city and the VIA, recognizing the long history of institutional interactions. The objective: to ensure accountability, budget submission, and reporting obligations regarding the use of public funds and the operation of the public library. If you're following along, this is in the columns under Council Recommendation number 46. Provision should also address the need of the VIA and the library staff to adopt administrative practices regarding procurement and personnel that align with the best practices adopted by legal standards applicable to municipalities. The council is mindful of the history of funding as well as past erratic funding issues that were detrimental to the library operation. We shared that with their council and with the director, as I said, and of her own volition, she offered to, much like we were just talking about the Board of Ed, put together a monthly reporting such that the city would be able to, if not control, see how the expenditures and the spend downs were occurring. That was, in my mind, an offering that she made. That wasn't a request. So I put that to you because that is the current state of affairs. That could be on the table. There are a number of data points that Attorney Mednick has collected because the state library put together information regarding municipal libraries that I think is illuminating. We had heard from them, that their attorneys at least, that the situation is not as unique as we all may think it to be, that many towns and libraries have this type of setup. And I can see that there are very many private improvement associations that handle gardening and libraries and all kinds of things, the gazebo and whatnot. But that being said, I think even amongst those, this one is still a little bit different. And I don't know exactly what the answer is on how to capture it. I suspect that this conversation will probably go into that July 1 meeting because I wish we had a silver bullet for you all that we learned in our conversations or in the information that was given to us, but unfortunately we don't right now.
So are you asking us to consider this language to be put into the charter?
No, the recommendation from the council back to the commission is simply to, with respect to the information that you see under Attorney Mednick's note in the margin,
Yep.
decide, one, if anything should be done, and two, if so, what, with these provisos in mind.
Thank you.
If I may, so the CRC had made a series of recommendations to the council that we deliberated on, and then we were discussing our counter recommendations, and then Attorney Cassini let us know on the last evening of this meeting, and we were concerned that perhaps something that we were going to recommend back either would not be binding because there's still a question of the effect of, or I'm sorry, the applicability of the charter on a separate nonprofit. So essentially what we did is punted it back and left it open-ended, because if we did nothing and didn't include any recommendation, the CRC is bound by whatever the city council sends back, and what we didn't want is to close the door. So what we did is we left it very broad, and in our mind, with the advice of counsel, that really gives the CRC the flexibility to kind of look at this again with fresh eyes and under the lens of that meeting, whatever information comes from there, to create a new set of recommendations. And at that point, it's going to unfortunately just be a yes or a no, which is why hopefully we could have a bit of a discussion. If not tonight, then whomever can attend on the 1st. But that was really the design of this recommendation, is a punt back.
So yeah, this is going to require more than anything else we're doing here, real rolling up our sleeves and figuring out how to deal with it. So one of the things that the Corporation Council and I had to discern from the meeting, the reason that the council kind of punted it, not really punted it, but basically sent it back here, knowing we're going to have a mediative process, is we wanted to figure out what kind of animal we're dealing with. And it's a very unique animal. It's more unique than they want to say. They do point out that there are 40 association libraries in the state. I think there actually may be more association libraries in the state. This is kind of a unique form because you have a not-for-profit that actually operates the facility and operates the function. In Stamford, which they call the mothership of private association libraries, it really is a separate entity. It's a separate library, but it's the library itself is the separate entity, and the library itself has its corporate status, whatever that status is. I have not reviewed the status, but even in Stamford, as I did a little bit of an analysis, they're not in the charter actually, but there's a specific reference in the Stamford Charter to financial and in-kind assistance from the city to the library. And so, which is actually a very instructive piece of language on how these things can be addressed. Most of the libraries, including the association libraries, are referenced in a charter, so it's not unusual to have them referenced in the charter. But what we were trying to figure out was what kind of animal they are. And Kevin did point out the that when the borough of West Haven was part of the Orange Town meeting, this was established 120 years ago with a $500 subsidy that we would be providing. What we are also trying to figure out is, moving fast forward to 2026, is that their employees are private employees. They're not employees of the city. They get health benefits through the Connecticut Partnership, through the VIA. They have a 401k retirement plan, so the idea that we thought that they might be paying into the city pension plan, it turns out not to be the case. We haven't verified that, but that is what we were told, that it really is a defined contribution that goes through a third-party administrator. It might be the same administrator that that the city uses, but that doesn't mean it's a city plan. It's a separate plan, so they do have these employees separately. The other thing, and this is where it gets murky, is they have a union, Local 393 of Council 4, AFSCME. Okay, everybody knows AFSCME is a municipal union. And so, that raises a few questions. How are they municipal unions if this is not a municipal entity? And then they tried to explain to us, and we actually should talk to one of Kevin's predecessors. Peter Barrett was apparently involved in these discussions in 2011 when the union was organizing, and the library director was an organizer of the union, so she had a lot of good, useful, relevant information. They were trying to figure out under what auspices would they be? Under what jurisdiction were they? Were they under the National Labor Relations Board or the State Labor Relations Board? And if they're under the State Labor Relations Board, presumably under MIRA. The National Labor Relations Board disclaimed jurisdiction. And I asked them if there was anything in writing, and none of them had it. But I think we should check with Peter Barrett to see if he's aware of anything in writing, because we had nobody from our side of the table that was at those discussions. But the State Labor Board did exercise jurisdiction. Peter, apparently, the Corporation Counsel for West Haven, opposed SLRB, State Labor Board jurisdiction, but it was determined that they would operate under MIRA. Now, the odd thing about that is they're operating under MIRA by analogy, not in strict literal compliance with MIRA, because strict literal requirements, compliance with MIRA would have you involved as the body that approves a collective bargaining agreement, and the mayor involved as the person who negotiates the collective bargaining agreement, or the mayor would delegate it to the librarian or delegate it to the VIA, whatever it may be, whatever the case is, but that's not the way it's been done. It's been hands-off in that regard. So, we're not going to get to the bottom of that determination. So I think we're going to have to operate on some assumption that these people are not city employees, that this is a separate entity, and then we have to figure out how we're going to build our relationship with them. There's no MOU, and so they operate. We give them money. I think people are generally happy with what they're doing. I don't think that I didn't detect from working with the council or prior to that with the commission that there's anybody who is unhappy with it. I just think the issue was, how do we establish greater levels of accountability so we know how the money is being spent? Two other very important issues is that they have not come, at least in recent years, and I don't think Kevin nor I have done the due diligence to determine whether they ever have come to the city for capital improvements. They take care of all their own capital. They own the buildings. They've owned the buildings, at least one of them, since 1906. And our members of our public get to use those buildings and have used those buildings regularly since 1906. And so that's an important thing to understand in terms of the equities and how we take a look at the role that they're playing in the community. We made the point that we did not believe that our clients, either the council or the commission, had any intention of taking them over operationally, having any administrative oversight over them. The issue was strictly accountability. And some, on the budget level. And so I think they're very supportive. I think Kevin made this point to you a few moments ago, to comply with any kind of disclosure requirements or reporting requirements on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, whatever we determine. And so I think we can probably build something of that nature. And so the question for us was, I'm not sure what else we're going to find. I mean, what we have found is they're concerned about their funding levels. They gave me some data. I got a lot more data just taking a look at budgets throughout the state. And when I was looking at communities and population from 39, just under 40,000, Norwich, to as high as 148, which is Bridgeport, to see the comparisons. We are funded a little less than many of the other communities, but not dramatically less than some of the other communities. Actually, Milford is at 1.2 million, which surprised me. That Milford, which is almost entirely equivalent, they're 52,000 population, we're 54 in those ranges. These are the population numbers that the state had. That Milford's number is that low. That maybe it's supplemented by other funding. That's the other point I want to make, is when you go through the state reports, what you find is they have all this very interesting data. And let me see if I can find it here quickly. One of the benefits of having the data, or having a not-for-profit, or having a third-party association library run, is that they are capable of raising money outside of the general fund, outside of government funding, or outside of dependency on the city. And you're going to find that if you go to a place like Greenwich, the numbers are phenomenal of what they bring in from the private sector, Friends of the Library, and there's other foundations that provide a lot of support for them. A lot of these association libraries were started with not just Carnegie money, but with some local industrialists putting up the money. The Silas Bronson Library in Waterbury, where I grew up, was funded by several families, the Scoville family, Chase family. If you know Waterbury, those are the big manufacturing plants in Waterbury. And to this day, there are funds, substantial independent funds, in accounts that are earmarked for the library that they get to use, and that the mayor, the council, the Board of Alders has no authority over. The West Haven VIA has virtually no private money at all. They really were at the bottom end of that. And that's not a statement, that's not a pejorative statement about them, but one of the benefits of having an organization like that as a 501c3 would be their ability to raise money with the tax exemption that they have. But that's not something that's in the cards here at this moment. But they are one of the lower, at the very low end of the average gift and fundraising income throughout the state is $140,000, and the average gift and fundraising income for West Haven is $10,000, according to the state data. And I think that's an important number to look at. So that's where we are. It was a productive meeting. I think they're approaching it in good faith. So they're a third party that we're going to have to talk to in this process. And so I think that we have the work cut out for us on July 1st. And I'm hoping between now and then we'll have more information on how to approach this. And both Kevin and I are happy to answer any of your questions on any thoughts that we have from an operational perspective on how we might delve into this issue. Did I miss anything, Kevin? Did I?
Just one thing. The last major project that the library did 25 years ago It was funded by the city.
So there has been funding. So that's important to know. So it's not they're not totally independent in that regard, and that's not unusual. In fact, one of the things I found here was, let me see if I can find my footnotes quickly here. One of the towns that yeah, I mean, Greenwich is amazing. I'm just looking at one of my footnotes here. 10% of their budget comes from the Peterson Foundation, 2% from the Friends of the Greenwich Library, and 12% from other sources. So 20, almost 25, almost a quarter of their budget comes from private sector sources. That's Greenwich. Okay, so that they have that ability to do those kinds of things. But some of the communities where there is, even where there's private fundraising, it was pointed out that there is capital monies that go into them from the city. So if what you're saying is true, that's just the historical record. It's good to know.
Thank you. Chairman Vargo has some comments.
Thank you. I just wanted to, Chairman Maddox, thank you very much for that outstanding summary of what happened. One thing I wanted to add is, and I'll open it up eventually to the City Council to give their thoughts as well. In addition to financial accountability and transparency, on the document really paved the way for shared services. Something that Councilman Rivera was talking a lot about. 2 years ago, the City Council was requested during the budget process to increase the line item to the budget for landscaping and plowing. And we said, why do we need to do that? Well, let's just have the city do that. And that created a relationship with the Public Works, and now they're taking care of that. So if it works in one area, it may very well work elsewhere. They have their own attorneys. They don't have grant writers, as far as I know. They don't have the manpower to do that. But if it's 99.999% funded by public taxpayer money, and they don't have the ability to go out for the grants, maybe the grants department, assume it's fully staffed, or once it's fully staffed, would be able to take that on. So we want to leave the room to have a cooperative agreement drafted eventually, so that way city services could be used to benefit them. That doesn't increase what the taxpayers are paying them. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Beaton.
Minnick, is it out of the realm of your experience that charters have built-in unfunded mandates in them as far as budgeting, whereas the constituents that came to public session, they were all adamant that there be a funding mechanism in the charter that will bring them to a defined percentage of what they needed moving forward. Is that?
I've drafted one or two of those in my time, but not in this context. There could be an application for it. The one that I think of most often is if you have an agency that is providing a watchdog function, an oversight function, and Waterbury is the example that I always give. Back in 2002, when they were coming through their financial crisis, we created in the charter an organization called the FARC, the Financial Audit Review Commission. FARC. Close, but not quite there. Waterbury had its problems. Waterbury, I have to tell you, is in an outstanding position. They were pre-MARB. They worked with an organization that was actually able to help them in a significant way get out of there. But one of the things we did was create the FARC. And under that organization, there's a provision that guarantees that they can never have less funding than the year before appropriation. So that if you appropriate to them $10 million in a given fiscal year, but the next year new mayor gets elected, I want them out of here. You can't get rid of them. You can't reduce it. You can flatline them, and after 5 or 10 or 20 years, their budget may be problematic, but then you have to have a mayor and a public that elects a mayor to try to undermine this accountability structure. So I've done that to establish and to protect standards for accountability. You can do it in the other way as well. But I'd have to look at other charters to see. I've never drafted anything of that nature. I've drafted it mainly in the oversight function to protect the integrity of an ethics board or an audit entity.
So we, as a CRC, has to decide whether we're going to revise our original recommendation or withdraw it.
Well, they did give you language. There is language in here that has come back to you, A and B, where we broke it up between the Village Improvement Association and the West Haven Public Library. So I think I'd have to go back and look at what our original language was. We marked it up a little bit. So basically what they have here is a slight modification of what our language was when it went over to them. But I think at the very least, you're going to want to have, I think the intent is you need to address it and address the issue with more granularity than we have in the past. And I think it's also important, whether it's in the footnote or whatever, to really explain the history of this entity. It's a separate entity. One of the things I did, and I didn't mention this, but I think they winced a little bit when we said you're like a department. I've come up with an alternate term to use so that they're not a department. I think we can describe them. I've used this term in other charters. I've never done the finance sections of your charter. I did change the dates in your charter this past year. But in a lot of charters, I call departments, because there are things other than departments that get money, budgeted entities. And so I have taken to thinking of them as a budgeted entity, not a department, which I think says to them, we're not trying to make you a department. We're not trying to pull you into the vortex of all the bureaucracy that departments have to face. We just want to get a budget from you, know those lines are there. We want monthly or quarterly reports, whatever you decide you want to do, so that we know how you're spending your money. And then by doing that, we will be able to make better judgments about what to do in the next budget cycle, but not to make you a department. So we don't want to take your employees over. We don't want to start bargaining with your employees. We don't want liability for the slip and falls on your property, those kinds of things. And I think those things, we somehow have to address those.
And we don't want them to charge us rent.
I did not want to say that publicly, but you're absolutely right, Mr. Chair. It's a very important, it's a very good point.
Yes.
I think what you mentioned with Waterbury is the solution. I think it addresses what the constituents asked for in public session. I think it addresses what my colleagues on the council concerns were as well. I think it's a mechanism of reassurance for both parties moving forward.
Member Hosky?
The constituents that I saw attend were members of the Village Improvement Committee. Do we know that they were actually the board members that attended and weren't outside people? I just want to make sure that, because the public is watching, the people I saw were the board members. Were there other people that didn't come? But that's not the. Oh, we.
Hold on.
It does to me. It does to me. And in transparency, because I think that's what we want to be transparent, that when we're saying the electors came, we should also say that those electors were part of the Village Improvement Board, because it does matter. It matters to me, which is why I said it, and I don't think I need anyone's permission to speak my mind and state my opinions, respectfully. Also, I want to say that I agree with Councilman Rivera. We have tried for many years to have shared services with the Village Improvement. They have always declined. We talked about payroll, bringing it all together because it's cheaper. We've talked about health insurance, trying to have group rates. They've always declined, so it would be great if they could do that. We even talked about the 401k. Because many people, if you use one company, you tend to get better rates and the fees you have to pay. Also, we've talked about solar, putting solar on their buildings to have their electric bills go down. They have never in the past come to the table. So if that can occur, that would be fantastic. And when you say that they have no monies, like that's like were you saying that they have no monies like outside of the endowment, or are you saying
I don't know what
they
my impression
majority of their funding comes from the city.
the overwhelming
I'm not
majority of
saying
funds.
that it doesn't. I'm saying he said that they had no monies. Is that
I think
in lieu of-
what I said was, and I don't know this, I'd have to verify it, but according to the state data, they have much less third-party money, private money, than most of the other association libraries.
Okay.
They have much more dependent, 98% plus,
and
dependent
that's
on local.
right, but
And that's not a disparaging comment.
no, it's
just-
not.
yeah.
And me sharing information is not disparaging either.
I agree.
You can have views and just be sharing information. I'm not. Who? And I also want to say that the city, when their budgets were cut, there was COVID, and we were under MARB, so a lot of departments, their budgets got cut. And I also know that the city tried to gift them a building that they decided not to take, but then turned around a couple. I mean, there's a lot going on, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with the city, the city council, the mayor having eyes on their budget. Because in the end, when they go into union negotiations, and if they try to give everybody 6% raises for the next 5 years, that money is going to be coming from the taxpayers. So that's my belief. And thank you for allowing me time on the floor to speak without interruption.
Thank you. Councilman Ronan?
I'm just going to yield my time. Thank you.
Okay. Chairman Varga?
Thank you. I think Commissioner Hosky brought up an interesting point. We have to be careful because the VIA is a separate entity from the city. So, correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney Mednick, but if we drew a line in the sand, said we want the library, the function, the operation of the library to be a department, that really opens up a can of worms of where's the line between the VIA entity and the city entity, and then with the shared services, there's certain limitations of what the city can provide. I think that legal services, perhaps grant writing services, DPW services, those are entirely appropriate. Insurances may be a problem, I don't know. But I think that all has to be fleshed out because there's legal ramifications.
Yeah, and the provision I talk about in Stamford, and I'll call the Corporation Counsel on there, who I know quite well, is a financial and in-kind assistance provision. And so one of the things we don't have with them is an MOU. We don't have a written understanding. Look, maybe that's the best way to do it. Things have been operating pretty well for 120 plus years, but to have perhaps if, and I know I'm a lawyer, and we get overly legalistic about things in this world, and I apologize for my brothers and sisters in the bar for that, and legislators as well who I know, but it might not hurt to have an MOU of some sort so that there is clarity on the relationship between the bodies, that their employees are serving in a library function. They are responsible for the maintenance, upkeep, and I would say capital improvements, but the chair of the Charter Commission has just corrected that record. They do own the real estate. We want to make sure there's some protection on liabilities, indemnification perhaps, those kinds of things as well. But I think it's important that we do something to make it clear that they are a separate entity. They're serving an important function. They're being funded. We want some accountability. It'll be up to all of you to decide whether you want to have some kind of floor legislation or other approach to dealing with financing. But I would say that at the very least, you'd want to have a reference in your charter to financial, that we may or shall or do perform financial and in-kind assistance. So that I thought that was a really good piece of language that I came across in the Stanford Charter that I think could have an application in our charter, in your charter as well. So,
Thank you, Chairman Vargo.
One question: would it be more appropriate or advantageous to the city if the charter just simply says, to the effect of "Thou shalt create an MOU between the city of West Haven and the VIA for the funding and for the funding at least of the library"? Because one question I have is, I think Commissioner Hosky brought up is what happens if you negotiate or if they negotiate a raise in the next contract that's astronomical, 9%, 10%, and then come to the city council and the mayor for that increase. But conversely, those are not employees of the city of West Haven. So aside from just saying, okay, you decided to do this, they very well may be deserving of that raise, but we're not going to pay for it. Aside from that, I'm not sure what legal say we have in that process, nor should we.
well, again, there's the confusion of their mirror status. If it's really mirror, you should have something to say about it. The mayor should have something to say about it. But you do have something to say about it. If they go out and do a 5% increase, and you guys are increasing by a 0.5%, 1%, 5%, 3%, 2%, whatever it may be, and they come to you with these numbers, you're going to say, "You're the ones who negotiate the 5%. You go find funding for it. We're just giving you this. Good luck." And so, I mean, I think that they are probably mindful of that. So I think they're probably going to be relatively smart about the way they approach that. But if they come in like that, you control the money ultimately, and the taxpayers. You'd have to consult with your taxpayers before you go off and accommodate that kind of increase if they were to do something like that. So they can do it. Presumably, but they don't have funding other than your funding right now to fund it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions from the CRC or the City Council? All right, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Tucker.
The only thing I will say is that I would not like to see any financial commitments in the city charter. I think that can be handled someplace other than the city charter if the bodies decide that they want to see that. I particularly would not want to see another unfunded mandate or a requirement that we have to give a certain amount. We already have that with the BOE, and it doesn't work out well for the taxpayers overall of the city, especially those who do not have children in school. So I personally don't want to see that. But that's what I wanted to just go on record as saying. I do support the library. I want it in Allentown. I live in Allentown. Like I said before, I grew up on that bookmobile, Dr. Seuss and Curious George. I want to see it, and I want it back in Allentown. So I'm going to just stop there.
Thank you. So I think any other discussion? Yes, sir. Councilman Quagliani.
So, I go way back as well with the library and the VIA. So I guess my first question, Attorney Mednick, so there's other monies. So I don't know how an entity goes about distributing that money, but there's public library fund money, and then there's other monies that the VIA has, because they have made large purchases outside of the money that we give them. So the information that you have that they only collect 10,000 may be true in the public library account, if you will, but on the VIA side, there is a pot of money, whether it be an endowment, whether it be whatever you want to call it, but there's monies there. Property was bought, or is continuing to look to be bought, buses, so there's money there. I guess I kind of take a little bit of offense to the last line of this number 46 that says the council is mindful of the history of funding as well as past erratic funding issues. Now, I mean, that's a commentary that's not objective. That shouldn't be in there. To member Hosky's comment, I mean, we were going through COVID. Everybody was getting their budgets cut, and the library gave bonuses out that particular year. The year after that, the city council gave them $100,000 for a rent at the Atwood, to open up a storefront for the Allingtown Library, which could have been there for 5 years by now. And they chose that they didn't particularly like that site. They wanted their own site, and they walked away from it. So there's a lot of give and take, and a lot depending on who you talk to. You know, there's a lot of filtering you have to go through. At the end of the day, forget about the past. We want to go forward. The library is an important part of this community. A healthy library is what people look for. I want to see it to be healthy. I'm sure everybody here wants to see it be healthy. But we also have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the dollars that the taxpayers are funding towards those libraries are being put to the best use. So that's what the struggle's been. It's kind of stop, start, stop, start. So, you know, if we could put an MOU together that really starts from the very beginning, because it concerns me that they're mirror employees, yet the city and the city council is not at the table for their negotiations. And then by the time they negotiate, it's really too late. They're coming to us with their budget appropriations. So I think an MOU is a good way to start, or maybe we just handle it completely differently. Maybe we make them an exclusive grantee, and every year they apply for a grant for up to $2 million, up to $2.2 million, whatever the mayor and the council wants to say. And in that grant application, here's all the requirements in order for you to be eligible for this money. You need to have monthly reports. You need to do this. You need to do that. You need to do the other thing. So, I mean, we've been not fighting. We've had a difference of opinion for as long as I've been here, 13 years, about the library and the collaboration. And the city has moved to help the library. Council, whatever your title is, Chairwoman Hosky's, recollection is correct. We went through budgets where we funded money for IT studies so we could bring in the library, shared services. We saw those things that are low-hanging fruit that we couldn't get any traction on. So at the end of the day, I personally want to see the library thrive, but I also want to be able to face my constituents and say, here's the reason why I supported their line item for $2.2 million, because A, B, C, and D. And I don't have any data to be able to back that up, except for the one line item that they give us that tell us that they're woefully funded, and we're one of the last ones where you say we're kind of middle of the road, right? Funding. Milford actually is funded less than we are. So it's a long way for me to come around and say it, but I think the MOU is the best place to go. Let's start at square one and move forward instead of what happened in the past.
So I believe, go ahead, Councilwoman Tucker.
And here I am starting another can of worms. I was just going to ask, I think maybe it was the other day, but I recall you mentioning something about the VIA, the relationship, and our maybe inability to take certain actions, or their perception that we're not able to take certain actions without having legal standing to do so. Not accurate. So I'm just trying to figure out, okay. So I want to understand the
somebody who testified at the public hearing said that we could not impose standards on a not-for-profit. Both the Corporation Council and I refuted that position.
Okay.
That if you're coming to us for money, and I think I told you the story. My daughter has a not-for-profit. She's told all the time, this is what you need to do. If you don't want to do it, you don't need our money. Okay. And so I disagree with that statement.
So then we could, ask for information or details about how the money is going to be spent if we choose to give them money, right?
Yeah, and if I may, I did not get the impression, I'll defer to Kevin on this from our conversation, that there's any resistance to providing the budgetary information. I think they've provided us with what they gave the mayor. I don't know how it gets distilled when it gets to the council, but they had a pretty detailed line item budget that they provided you with. And they don't have any problem with a regular reporting requirement, a written reporting requirement. They might even be willing to come talk to the council on a periodic basis. And the importance of the reporting requirement is like with the Board of Ed. You get to track how they're spending their money, and so that at the end of the year, if they massively alter their priorities, you have a right to ask them, look, last year you told us you wanted to do this, and look what you ended up doing during the course of the year. It gives you more data points upon which to make informed judgments when they ask you for the 2 million or the 3 million or the 1.5 million or whatever the amount may be.
I just wanted to make 2 points to remind you. I know we had this conversation with the city council. I don't remember if we had it prior to that. There are some shared services that the two engage in right now. DPW spends time collecting their trash, snow and ice removal, landscaping. And that doesn't seem to be an issue. In fact, that seemed to be a pretty elegant solution to a request for more money. Obviously everybody remembers this, but I'll just say it for the record. You can improve their budget by giving them more money or making sure that they spend less by offering them those services. So that could be an opportunity. I don't remember who suggested it. Maybe it was Chairman Vargo, just indicating in the charter that there shall be an MOU. May satisfy what you're doing, but then, of course, it doesn't push the conversation off very long. We still need to engage in it one way or another. So as I see it, the commission has one of 3 choices. You can do nothing and have it status quo. You can go back to the language that we had concocted and sent to the council, or we can come up with something new that addresses it, that answers a lot of the questions that are being asked, some of which have been answered, some of which need to still be answered. I leave that up to you what to do, but that's how I see what your options are.
Can we charge you too with trying to come up with an understanding with them in the VIA by July 1st that we can...
Meaning an MOU?
Or whatever.
That probably wouldn't work just because I bet you that they would want more time to talk amongst themselves and figure things out.
Yep.
But I think, geez, I don't want to pretend that I've been in Geneva lately and building frameworks, but I think that we could probably work with them on establishing a framework that would give us enough to hang our hat on in the charter to be able to move forward with discussions. And I won't say in 60 days. I won't add that. Anybody watching the news, you missed it. Okay, I'm sorry. I think that we can establish a framework with them. I think if we get off the issue of calling them a department, say that we want to basically have a reporting requirement, that we want to have budget submission, fulsome budget.
I think the discussion tonight has simplified this in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I agree.
Any other discussion? Chairman Vargo.
Speaking for myself only, my personal preference is actually option 3 that Attorney Cassini brought up, is perhaps my personal request of the CRC is to craft language that says that the city and the CRC will work on an MOU, within a very relatively short but appropriate time frame. Have the reporting requirements on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, whatever would be appropriate. That way, the city council, during its financial review process at the end of the months, can see where the money's going, and a full disclosure, which I'm usually pretty happy with the last couple of budget disclosures with the backup. I think the presentation could be a little bit better, but we do get some more information than I think that prior city councils have gotten. But maybe solidify that's the expectation, that during the budget we're going to know what their line items are. We're going to know what their actuals are, not only at the end of the year but periodically throughout the months, and that the city is going to craft an MOU that addresses the other operational relationships.
And while they're not a department, quote unquote, the expectation during budget season is they provide the same information any other department's providing to the council.
Agree, because I think the mayor, I think the city council, and I think the public has an absolute right to know where the money that the taxpayers are giving us is going and what it's going to be used for. And if it's not, if it doesn't feel appropriate, that there should be an option to be able to make changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I throw it back to you, Member Garlock, yes.
So with the MOU
and monthly budget requirements, since only reported was like 10,000 in grants, would we ask that they supply all grants that they receive throughout the year in their budget?
Oh,
If you all pull the microphones to your
Yeah.
faces, would we then ask if grants for, say, capital improvements, any different programs that they have are included in their budget?
Any
to
other
go-
funding
Right.
sources?
Should that also be included?
that seems like an appropriate. If the vast majority of their operational costs are being funded through taxpayer dollars, I don't see why the taxpayers don't have a right to see where the other, small percentages are coming from. Because maybe there are ways to increase those to offset what the taxpayers are paying.
Member Idarola?
If they were supplying line items, that would be there anyway, though. Grants would be included in that, wouldn't it? Otherwise, wouldn't that be considered hiding some money? If they're, you said full disclosure and supplying line items, wouldn't a grant be in a line item of their?
I'm going to defer to my colleagues on the council. I don't recall seeing other revenue sources in their presentations. I think it's just
No,
expenditures.
I'm not asking if it's been in the past, but if they change this language and we do want line items in their budget and, full disclosure, wouldn't the grants have to be a part of that? Money taken in, right?
On a going forward basis, I would agree with what you said, yeah.
But they could always come back and say, we only are obligated to give you information on the money that you fund, meaning the city. Any other questions? Discussion? Member Tagliatella has to leave in a few minutes, so I'm going to throw it back to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Council, unless I'm mistaken, we've touched on all 46 points raised in the communication.
Yes, I agree. I think you've gone through 1 through 46.
Thank you. So now the work is back in the CRC's hands. I wish you all luck, and hopefully you can get it done in the one night. If not, then I'm smiling because I've had many threats against me by my colleagues for the number of meetings, and I say that facetiously. But again, thank you all for the thoughtful discussion, the questions. I do believe that we are on the right track, and I have every confidence that you all are going to produce an outstanding document that the City Council is going to be able to sign on to, and hopefully the taxpayers and the voters in a couple of short months. I wish you all luck, and I thank you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, do you have anything else?
Yeah, right.
No, I'd like to thank everyone also and
The attorneys.
adjourn the meeting. Certainly the attorneys, and adjourn the meeting.
And City Council, I love you all, but I'm looking forward to having a couple of weeks not being here. With that, motion to go home.
Yes.
Thank you all very much.